Good morning, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, and welcome back to the Endless Void. We're here in our Wizard Zoo. This is a randomizer zoo that we've been working on. We're moving on to episode 3. So, actually episode 4, I think now, because we started off by building our little entrance platform over there. And then we moved on to building a habitat for elephants, and then last week we started building this lion habitat, which I'm quite happy with. It's not... There's maybe a lot more that I could have done with like the building area over there, but honestly, I'm kind of okay with it. I'm okay. So yeah, we've got our lions all set up. They seem very happy. I think we're expecting cubs, which is very cool. In the background, you will notice that I've done a couple of changes. So first off, you'll notice that there's like these handful of guests. I don't even know how they got in here. I think we're starting to get a trickle in now that our paths are set back up, but, I mean, probably not. Maybe they just got stuck. I have no idea why there's people here. We ended up having to close the zoo, so that way I could rework all of the platforming, because I ended up adding in this little extra island over here. So we had just this floating walkway, and I wasn't in love with it, couldn't figure out what to do with it, and it felt really awkward just having this hole. So we've added in a new platform, and I'm working on this, like, mega structure over here. I don't have any solid plans for it, so I'm sure by the time you see it again, it'll have changed. Who knows? But with that done, as you've already seen by the title, and if you watched to the end of last episode, we are working on bonobos today. So unfortunately, with this being a randomizer zoo, I seem to have gotten all of the animals that don't have a lot of randomizer options. But thankfully, you know, bonobos are a variation from the savanna biome that we've been stuck in for a couple of episodes now. We basically get to move on to the tropical biome, which I'm very happy about. And I've got a couple of ideas of what I want to do with this. So I've, again, reworked some of the pathing through here. On top of having this nice little bridge, we've reworked this walkway through here. And that's because this walkway is basically going to act as our viewing area for our bonobos. So you'll walk through, and then you'll be able to move up onto this little platform here, and then see the elephants. And it gives us a little bit more flexibility in case we want to come over here, or, you know, move this down and have a platform over here. Just different ways to expand the zoo. So hopefully this gives us a little bit more flexibility. But for right now, we need to discuss what we're going to do with our bonobos. So a little bit of an overview real quick. The main things we need to know is that they need a grade 3 climb-proof boundary of at least 5 meters, which we honestly don't need to care about because, thankfully, the void will pretty much stop anything from moving. We also need to be mindful of their water space. So it says here that water of 6 meters wide and 2 meters deep will stop them and act as a barrier. In my experience, this requirement basically means don't add water, they can't cross it. We'll see what that means with the bonobos, if that actually holds true or not, but it is something for us to keep in mind, especially because we are working with the tropical. You would think we would want more water. We'll see. We'll see how that works. We need 3 to 10 bonobos. We can have any mixture of up to 7 males and 7 females. They are confident with humans, but we don't want our guests anywhere near them. So this gives us sort of an indication of how we want to build the habitat, and then like I said, there's only the one biome, which I am disappointed about. You only get tropical Africa. Even so, I think that we can do something with this, especially if you're familiar with, like, if you've ever heard of the cloud forest, which is not in Africa, I believe it's in Costa Rica, but I've always thought that it would be really cool to have a literal cloud forest. So it turns out that we can also do this. So we don't have to like pull off of anything. We can just plunk some terrain into the void. I love that. So this gives us some nice, good opportunities to start building up these little platforms. And that is something that we do need to do, because remember, as much as our bonobos are going to be able to navigate this through basically climbing, we need to make sure that our human keepers can also navigate this habitat as well. So let's go ahead and make sure that we're going to have enough land. There we are. I think something like that'll work, and then of course we'll shape this up as we go. We also imported a whole bunch of our rock structures. These will be useful as we continue to sort of shape up our islands and make them look decent. I started on this one over here. It's still, I don't know. I haven't figured out what I want to do with the shapes of these islands just yet. But for now, let's focus on our bonobos and make sure that everything actually looks good. Alright, so that'll be our first platform. Let's go ahead and start figuring out how we're going to do these barriers, because that's going to be another tricky question. Now, in order to maintain the illusion, now that we've got our basic outline done, we're going to need to have some kind of terrain that connects these platforms, because unfortunately, the barriers will not cross over the void. You know, if we pull out over here, it just says no. It needs to connect to some kind of ground in order to work. So I think the best way we're going to be able to do this is if we go to like a size 1, keep the intensity low, and then we sort of drag out where we can. Actually, we're going to have to make it intensity 100 just because of how this works. Maybe size 2. There we are. And then we can begin the path. There we are. Okay. So that will work, and then we will simply just decorate these a little bit. Again, I think if we lower the intensity, see, we can keep these kind of thin and small. And then from there we can do something like, let's remove the plants. Let's get out our tropical filters. All right, so we use some basket ferns, and then probably some moths, some of these lima vines, like the really big ones, this curtain. And I think between these, we can create the illusion, or maybe even like branches, that this is being held together by like some ancient tree, rather than it actually being terrain. So I think that that's going to be the direction that we go with for connecting these up. In the meantime, I'm going to finish up these other 2 platforms, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so I've finished building up these different platforms. I ended up having to add this weird little, like, texture ball over here, just so that way we could get all the brackets done without having, like, a string of terrain. If we look at our barriers, you see that it goes around the entire island now, so this is working for us pretty well. And we have 2988 square meters, so if we wanted to, we could house a full pack of wolves in here, which I think is probably going to be enough for our bonobos, but let's go check our space. So at a maximum, we have a need for 10,080 square meters, 1,080 square meters, not 10,000, my goodness, we're not building for elephants again. And then 260 climbing square meters, which we're going to exceed. That's not an issue. So this actually gives us a really nice barrier, or a buffer, I guess, for all of the decorating that we're probably going to need to do in order to make this work. So first things first, let's go ahead and clean these up. And then the next thing that we want to do is make sure that all of these end up connected enough that humans could traverse it. Because again, remember, we need to make sure that our keepers can actually cover this space. We're not doing this in full sandbox mode. We do still have zoo elements. So let's go ahead and go into our nature tab and see what we can do for some roots. I'm pretty sure that we're going to want these strangle figs as much as possible. Yeah. And the only thing I don't know is whether or not they match our continent. Let's go double check. They do. That's good, because most of this plan hinges on these things. So, we could potentially use, like some of our shrivel fig, like just the whole tree asset. And these would probably work out pretty well. For some of these, I'd like to keep it a little bit more thin, but we'll see how this goes. It might look terrible. It might look fairly convincing. Just gonna depend. But I think something like that definitely works. It is a little bit more fluffy than I would like to see, but considering that we need to only do it on one of the platforms each, I think this is gonna be okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and get these fixed up, and then we'll see where we land. That actually looks okay. Yeah, I think this kind of root ball situation is probably going to work out really well for us. Good. So our barriers are at the very least connected up. Our platforms are roughly connected. So now the next thing that we need to think about is how we're going to connect these for both our humans and our bonobos. So I don't know that this structure is actually going to do the trick. I hope it does. I think it would be cool if it did, but unfortunately there's really no guarantee until we actually get some critters in here, and then of course some can I please have my part? Thank you. It really doesn't like working over the void. I can't fathom why. Almost like you're not supposed to be able to do this or something. At the very least, you're not. This is not advisable, I should say. You obviously can. I'm not using any exploits, but this is a tangent. What I'm saying is that we need to make sure that this is actually something that somebody could traverse and is not just like insanity for the sake of insanity, you know? Alright. So with these two at least connected, let's grab some bonobos and see where this lands us. Alright, that is our first bonobo in. And let's see how they're doing. Welfare is bad. Welfare is just straight up bad. Let's figure out why and how. So these platforms are not traversable. That's important to know. Our keeper, likewise, is also... Oh no, our keepers can traverse this, surprisingly. But the chimps can't. So we are going to need to work on these bridges a little bit more, figure out something that does work for us. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a thought. We're going to tinker a little bit and then we'll come back. There we go. Alright, so our 3 islands are finally taken care of. We have full coverage as far as their navigable land space goes. What we need to start working on now is going to be this climbing space. So this strangler fig tree that we have, I don't think that it's technically climbable. Let me double check. No. So it does not get to be considered a climbable asset. So let's go ahead and grab some of those instead. We're definitely going to want to work with some trees and then probably some like platforms, I think. So K-Pox are not climbable, but they're going to be really good for probably some like treehouse kind of setups. So I think I'd like to include a couple of them. Do I like that? I don't. I don't actually like that. Sausage trees might be very cool. I mean, obviously we're going to need some of these. Oh yeah, we have one of those. Okay, so my treehouse idea is actually working because the bonobos can climb these vertically, which is very cool. I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to. I was pretty sure the cats can, but they can as well. So this gives us something to work with, doesn't it? So our tree is the problem. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. I mean, it's gonna look a little weird, but I mean, for the effect, I think it's okay. So we know that the climbing structures are gonna work pretty well for something like this. We will get back to detailing in a little bit. For right now, I want to make sure that they can't jump over these rails, because that is a real concern. As you can see right here. Now part of it might just be the way that this is meshing. So we'll deal with our barriers first. Okay, and the rest I think we can fix with like just some rocks. Not going to be that big of a deal. It doesn't look like our chimpanzees are going to be able to hop up onto our walkway over there, which is exactly what we want. We want that to be like as safe as possible for the human guests. So with that done, let's go ahead and check our sightlines. What are we actually able to look at through here? So far, everything's nice and visible. Even with the bonobos being so far away, I mean, you can make them out. I think that this is going to end up being more of like a private island. And then we should incorporate more climbing stuff here in the front as well, just so that way our guests can actually see that stuff. So what I think I'm going to do, since you saw me fidget with this, you get the idea of what I'm going to go for. I'm going to go ahead and start incorporating more climbing aspects into this. And then after that, we'll move into more of the ground cover aspect and the rock work, and then we'll work on making this nice and tropical. Alright, so great news. We are back, and I believe all of the climbing frames that I'm going to work into this are done. So we've got a couple of copy-paste jobs because it just made the most sense to do, quite frankly. So this tree platform that we worked on before, I went ahead and copied it over, did some modifications so that way they could actually get up on the platform because that was an issue. And we've connected it through vines over to this platform, so they can for sure get onto this. If I go ahead and pull these guys up, so you can see their traversable space is working really well. I also did another one of these right here, so we connected some vines between this Stranglethorn and this Tamarin. If I turn the view off, you can see. So, again, using this structure and this structure again. And then, of course, did a little bit of work over here. For some reason, the bonobos don't want to stand on this platform. I don't know why. I tried to work on it. But I managed to get everything to work if I used these climbing platforms, so this is just going to be more climbing space. And then, of course, we have the connections through here, which is how they're getting up. So overall, I think that we are done trying to figure out how to make this traversable for them. And the next thing we're going to do is start focusing on our rock work, because that, I think, is really going to help to bring in more of the jungly vibe. Right now, it just feels like a awkward, unfinished forest. So we're going to work on that a little bit. Of course, our terrain mixtures are all wrong, so we'll need to work on that. We've got some weird foliage issues, mostly due to the clipping of these two habitats on top of each other. But we're sitting at 0%. It's not negatively impacting them in any meaningful way. So we're going to keep working on that. Their foliage, we're at 43%. We've got this turned off, though, so it doesn't matter. We can over-decorate this as much as we want, and that's not going to cause any problems for us. And then, of course, we need to make sure that we have all of their enrichment. So their climbing is all done, but we need to make sure that we get in things like our termite mounds, our tree foragers, maybe one of these big forage boxes. I never add these because their footprint is just so huge. But it might be able to work somewhere like down here, maybe. And then we're going to have to work on some of their toys, which, because this is an endless floating void, there is going to be some issues with the items falling off, you know, these bobbins. To a less egregious extent, probably the gift boxes, maybe the keyboard. So we're really looking at, like, mirror mobiles and sprinklers for the most part. And of course, I'm sure that we can figure out how to, like, wall in certain areas so that way each enrichment has, like, its own spot that it belongs to in the jungle. So we're going to start working on fixing up our rock work and our ground cover now that, like, all of the infrastructure, I guess, is put in, as we might say. And then from there, we will start decorating. Okay, so I think I've done all of the rock work that I really want to do right now. I've covered a lot of the edges, but not all of them. And the goal here was really just to make sure that we had enough texture to put on the ground that it didn't feel quite so bland anymore, and to give us a base for all of our foliage, which is what we're going to be doing next. So we're going to try and work from the ground up, because I've had a lot of work, a lot of success with that before, and considering that most of our ups are already determined, essentially, like, we don't want to put too much onto the surface to completely, like, obstruct our views. That's something that we're really having to fight here. But on the other hand, we need it to look jungly enough that this is believable, you know? So this is going to be more of a sparse jungle, but I'm hoping that it will still sell the effect once we get all of the Gaviola and probably the ferns and whatever else I can find in there. And right now, I think I am pretty happy with how things are going. We've got some pretty good views. You can definitely see the bonobos from just about anywhere you look. There is a little bit of sight blocking. And, of course, one of the things that we're working with is that the guests just cannot see as far as we can, as far as their coding is concerned. Or at least that's what my testing has shown. I'll probably do some alterations again to, like, how we're painting the terrain. But for right now, this is sort of the baseline that we're working with. We have quite a large budget. We could probably turn all of this into soil and then back it off, and that would give us roughly the same effect. They don't really like a lot of long grass, and they have a certain need for short grass, but it's not like really large. So we'll see how that ends up changing, but for right now, let's go ahead and get the plants down, and we'll see where that carries us. Okay, so we now have tons and tons and tons of foliage. Just to go over it real quick with you, I've used some of the rhubarbs just to add something really big that kind of like pops out as far as size goes. And then I've made these little clusters with these bird's nest ferns, and that's how I managed to do this all A, so quickly, but B, I think it looks really good. This is closer to what I expect a jungle to look like, just covered in ferns and green and rocks, and you never really know what you're gonna set your foot on next. Like that to me strikes me as a jungle. So I've really worked in those, as well as our scaviola, to sort of add a more grainy texture. I don't know, for me this always looks like the plant equivalent of like television noise. Just to add some of that change to maybe some of the textures, even though the colors aren't necessarily something that's gonna pop out. Yeah, so I'm liking it so far. Again, we did do a little bit of terrain modification, mostly on this closest island. I think the farther back we go, the less it really matters as far as the visuals go. And we're well within range of our bonobos. They should be quite happy. Yeah, we're doing just fine. This is going to rearrange like how they interact with things. So let's double check and make sure that they've still got full momentum. They do, yeah. So most importantly, we need to make sure that these little connector bits through here all function, and they do. So let's make sure that this works as well for the staff. It absolutely does. If anything, the staff are having a better time traversing this habitat than the bonobos are, which is unusual. There we are. And then we've got tons and tons of climbing space. And the nice thing about using these bird's nest ferns and the scalviola is that these are considered transparent blocks, so we're not going to have any issues with them like disrupting our bonobo's momentum. So you'll see them pass in and out of these grass patches, which I think is a really cool effect. So, of course, the next thing that we need to consider is, do we want more greenery? Do we want more height? Do we want more vines? And if so, how would we even go about that? Personally, I'm kind of okay with this. There's not, I don't think, a lot that we can do without completely overcrowding the space, and we are very much at risk of doing that right now. So I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do. Maybe we'll add vines to these platforms and to some of the things that we already have sort of standing up to give that sort of hanging texture. But the other thing that we need to do real quick is add in our enrichment items. So let's go ahead and add those. So I think right up here where the ground is flattest might be a safe place for us to add something like a cardboard box or two. This musical instrument, let's put it over here, say. And then we do need to consider our food. So I really like the idea of having these termite mounds. So this is going to alter our terrain a little bit, but hopefully not too much. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do to disable this. It will just always do that, and then we have to like edit around it. And then this little fallen tree thing I think would look really cool over here. And then there are a couple of other little puzzle feeders, like this one. I've never seen this tool puzzle feeder. I guess this must be new with the latest DLC. I'm not entirely sure, but let's double check what we are looking at in terms of their enrichment. Thank you. So food is good. Toy enrichment is really going to be where we need to focus on. Let's add a couple of these sprinklers. Question is going to be where? I believe right here might work. I wish that when you added a sprinkler that it didn't automatically like pop you into heat mode. It's really aggravating and disorienting, but unfortunately I've never found a setting to change that. Sure, we can add another one right there. And then we still need a couple more pieces. Let's get one of these mirrors, I think, because they are not going to do too much to the terrain. Yeah, we could put it right there. And we're so close. We're at 99. Let's get a block of ice. And this, once again, we can put more towards the entrance. Or maybe even one of these bobbins. I like that. Let's add a bobbin. There. So our welfare is now up at 99. We're really getting cut into mostly through their nutrition. Of course, once we get that fixed up, which since we don't have a budget, we can just go ahead and do right now. Food quality 3. So this should be everything that they need. So they're happy now. So I think we can work a little bit on some of those vines, see where that takes us, if they're even necessary. I sure would like to use them, but I don't know how much we actually need. And then after that, I think that that is a habitat. So let's get the vines done and see where we are. Yeah, I think that that helps a lot. And then maybe one of the other things that we think about is adding in more of those root structures. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really all that's needed. We don't really want to go overboard. I suppose if we wanted to add a little bit more ground texture, we could use our faux rocks. Honestly, I don't feel comfortable using a whole lot of these. Let's put a couple more down and see how the bonobos handle traversing them. Because if they're not actually going to be able to walk over them, then there's no point in adding these. Yeah, it is causing a little bit of disruption, so I think I'm not going to leave these in very much. Yeah, we'll keep a few around, but for the most part, I think we're done. But yeah, so that has been all the construction that we need to do for bonobo habitat. Let's go ahead and... Oh! What is this? Why are we... What? What is happening? No, that's not even a little bit like what I wanted you to do. Let's do explore mode. There we go. And let's hit play so that way we can actually see them wander around a little bit. Hi. Oh. He's on a mission. But yeah, so here are our bonobos. I have not learned their names yet. Someday I'm sure I will. And they seem to be, I don't know, they seem happy. I like this habitat. Obviously we need to do some cleanup of like assets and stuff like that. That's always in the background. But for the most part, considering that we wanted to do a cloud forest jungle thing, I think we succeeded. There are a couple of little like effects things I would love to do. There's also a little bit of cleanup we're gonna have to do as well. Like this. Let's go ahead and fix this real quick. Yeah, down onto the ground you go. There. That should help. Yeah, there's a couple of things that we could also do. Like, we could add some fog effects, and I think that that would be really pretty. But I think that that's something that... well, I mean, I'll experiment with it, but I don't know. It might be something that we look at in the next episode if it ends up staying. A lot of it is going to be visibility issues, right? So we do want to kind of focus on that idea of like a cloud forest, but, you know, again, there are certain logistics considerations we got to consider, so. But I am really happy with it. This is one of my favorite jungle habitats that I've built so far. I find that building jungles is always extremely difficult because they require such intricate detailing, and to a certain extent, that is just something I'm not interested in, you know? But I think that this is working okay. So, with this shot of our bonobo playing with the sprinkler, I think I am going to let you guys go. Thank you very much for joining me. Hope you all have enjoyed the build. If you did, I suppose there are buttons. I don't know. I don't normally bother doing that. Yeah, if you did, I'd love to hear also, like, whatever suggestions you guys have. Um, and, oh, goodness, before we leave properly, we need to go spin the wheel, which we'll do in a moment. For those of you who don't want to see the wheel spinning, thank you very much for joining me, especially if you made it this far. Yeah, we will be back next week with an animal to be determined shortly. So, anyway, have a great week. Happy Friday. Yeah, good luck, have fun, and happy building. Alrighty, my super secret wheel people. It is time. What are we getting next week? 3, 2, 1. The Wheel of Mystery has spoken. We're building quokkas next week. Alright, see you there. Hopefully it'll be something different. We'll see. Bye, I'll see you next week.